So welcome everybody. This is Wednesday of Halton Garden Week and we're excited to have everybody here today, and we're thrilled to have Monika Meulman from Lakeshore Environmental Gardening Society. Monika focuses on teaching clients in being fully aware, fully connected to self, to life connections, and growth in one's loving human self. She runs a beautiful apothecary, The Healing Muse, where she promotes action and creation, growth with Zen-based principles and everything. She encourages you to focus on honoring the earth, our home, and every step of our life and garden. She is also the chair of LEGS, Lakeshore Environmental Gardening Society in West Toronto. So we are thrilled to have Monika with us here today to discuss foraging and learning to identify wild vegetables. So thank you very much for joining us today, Monika. And I love the title of or the acronym for your society, LEGS.
Yeah, we have LEGS will garden.
So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you guys, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's so fun and a great privilege to be able to talk about plants and share about plants and nature all the time. It makes me feel so glad and expansive to share everything about the earth with you. And hopefully you guys will have lots of questions or follow up later too, because there's so much to discover. And I could talk about plants all day, every day. As some of you have joined some of my talks and workshops before, I would talk about plants all day long if I could, plants and animals. It's my intention today to give you guys an inspire you in one way or another to go out there into our beautiful parklands, into our woodlands, into the land that we have around us, and start learning more than you know today, to go and explore. This is a perfect time of year as we're warming up to spring to start learning about how everything grows around you, and then keep learning so you can share that with everyone else you know. So without further delay, we're going to embark on learning about what it is foraging in the wild, or the urban wild, I would like to say, what it's all about. And some of you may have gone out many a times and you have great experience, which you're welcome here to share with us. We're going to have a question time. And those of you who are new or just beginning to learn about going out there, welcome. And hopefully something here will spark your interest and we can learn some more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a slideshow. So I'm going to share the screen, I think, to make this work. And then we can go here to share that. Perfect. And then hopefully you guys can see everything as I go into full screen. Let's see if this works. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to move you guys over. Make this a bit smaller. Perfect. Good. So welcome to Foraging and Learning to Identify Wild Vegetables. I will stop this screen maybe throughout, but maybe not. It might be fine as the way it is. Let's try and go to this thing. So my go-to is to always be a beginner. I love this Zen saying, because when you step out into the world today, every day, and you practice being a beginner, you have hundreds of options, thousands of options at your disposal. You're humble, you show gratitude and express thanks to the earth and everywhere that we're going throughout the day, because you recognize that you know only what you've learned so far, and today is another day to learn. And that is how I would like you guys to forage. If you're going out into the world, forage knowing that there's something more you can learn today and tomorrow and so on. So always be a beginner. Let's go here. Oh. Okay, so what is foraging? As you can see here from last summer, we did a talk. We did a talk with the Gardens Network, and we foraged some wild flowers, which were not so wild because they've become urbanized and grow everywhere nowadays, daylilies. And it brings us to, where do we start? If you're a beginner and you've never gone for wild walks, Foraging is simply going to harvest, gather, find food. Doesn't have to be food, but usually food or even tools, materials, foraging for building materials, foraging for nesting materials. Think of a squirrel or a bird. Once you're one with nature, you can forage for a variety of things. But in this context, we're going to talk more about food than anything else. And there is a lot of beautiful edibles out there. And you can go throughout our parklands, our local parklands, in the urban areas around the GTA, the Toronto area, or you can be out in the woods, in the wild. And in Canada, we're fortunate. There's so many places around streams, rivers, hillsides, lots of places to go and forage. So foraging is going out there and looking for resources, finding things that are in abundance, and being able to take something home with you to wherever your home is. Let's go to our next slide. So my question to you, how many of you, you can tell us later when we're sharing, how many of you would eat this harvest early summer salad? So this is what we had picked up, I think it was last June. So these flowers are available from about May till August, most of these in the picture. And I have a write down for them of them in the next slide.
Sorry, Monika, Monika, can I just interrupt? Your slides are not moving forward.
Oh no, okay. What do you guys see?
Just your title page. I think you need to, just the foraging and learning to identify wild vegetables.
Oh my God, you guys don't see anything then. That's so sad. Good, thank you. Yeah, let me know. Read mode, let's see. So escape this. How about this?
That's still the, oh, sorry. Now I see the perfect spring summer salad.
Okay, oh my God. Okay, so always be a beginner, la la la, urban areas, countryside, and would you eat this? Can you guys see that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Oh my gosh, you guys would have been thinking, what is she talking about? I don't see anything. Okay, I think that's plenty, right? Is that a good size for everybody? Okay, so in here in the salad, we have daylilies, which are now becoming invasive all over the place. You see them on countrysides, you see them on roadsides. Milkweed buds, we have some St. John's wort, we have rose petals, we have echinacea, lots to eat there. So I would call this an early summer salad. So this is a summary of what would be in there. I also threw in there some hosta buds. Hostas are edible, especially the fresh young shoots and the flower buds. And lots of other things invasive like garlic mustard, which we'll talk about shortly. So one of the things I love to do is gather things that grow in abundance out in our countryside, in our urban countrysides, and that's goldenrod. Goldenrod is a wonderful herb. It's colorful, bright, grows in full flower from about August till November. And it's a wonderful tea. It is calming for the respiratory system, has a nice smooth taste. So that's an example of how you could go out and forage some goldenrod, hang it up at home, and you have some dried herb tea fresh from our local areas. Okay, so that brings us to our first pro tip of when we're talking about going out into the woods or going out into the urban parkland. It's important to start learning about one or two or three of the plants you would like to find or you would like to look out for and forage, harvest for yourself or your family by looking at the cycle. How does it grow? So start now. So you're going to go out in March and preferably every month from there on in your regular areas and see how the plants grow. So you get to know them. So goldenrod, which we saw on the previous slide, gorgeous. This is goldenrod. You guys can see this is goldenrod in early spring. It's one of the first plants to come up in the forest floor and in the parklands, but it's quite small and indistinguishable for the first couple of months. And it grows by the thousands. So it's a wonderful herb to get to know and harvest, but get to know it from the first sign in the spring. Now I put a pro tip in here for you guys that goldenrod often grows near ragweed. Ragweed is an allergen and has very small light pollen vessels, how would you say, that come up and rise up into our respiratory tract that we inhale and become irritating. Whereas goldenrod, the pollen's too big and heavy to become an irritant. So people mistake goldenrod for ragweed because they usually grow side by side or close together. But goldenrod is a wonderful herb to bring home with you because it actually helps alleviate some of the allergic symptoms. So one of the first things to start learning this year, if you haven't learned it already, is the difference between ragweed, what ragweed looks like. It's green and has green bud flowers, and goldenrod is tall green with bright yellow, tall stalks of flowers. Another pro tip from growing and learning the growing cycles is that if you're going to get into eating something like roots, burdock root, burdock grows everywhere. It's a wonderful weed. It's not really a weed, but it's a wonderful spreader. Covers a lot of areas, but the root is only tasty and useful in the first year. It's a 2-year growing cycle. So the second year, the plant creates long stalk, flower stalk, and goes to seed. So all of the energy goes from the root into actually making flowers and seeds the second year. So if you see young burdock, you might have to wait a bit before you see the flower stalk emerging. And when there's no flower stalk, you know it's a first year plant. So that will be the type of plant you want to harvest. So here are a couple plants that are good to start learning with because they're abundant, they're easy to find, they're fairly large plants, and they are good for you. Okay, now here's another pro tip. And Helen and I were talking about this because there are a lot of ethics or thoughts about how to harvest, when to harvest. Is it legal to harvest? Is it appropriate to harvest going into wildlife? But I like to harvest for things that are invasive, like daylilies in woodlands. Daylilies don't belong in the woodlands, or garlic mustard is everywhere, or Japanese knotweed is growing everywhere. These type of plants, once you get to know them, they're invasive and they can be eliminated little by little. They're edible. And now my pro tip is when you're going out into the wild, going for a walk in the park, you can bring native seeds with you. So I might bring Joe Pye weed seeds, or I might bring milkweed seeds and drop them along as I go, because then I'm bringing native, locally grown plants that belong in that area with me. So that's something to think about. If you investigate the region that you live in and you look on like on Ontario Wildlife or Ontario Wildflower websites, you can see what plants naturally grow in that area and belong there. And if you can get your hands on those seeds, bring those seeds with you. And that way you're helping promote the natural flora and fauna in that area. So that's something fun to do with the whole family. And also it's another thing to think about too, that when we're going out foraging, we are taking something from the earth and the earth is providing, but then you are promoting the cycle by bringing something back. So it's wonderful on many different layers. So let's get into spring. What are we going to be looking for in the next 6 to 8 weeks for sure? Most of these will become noticeable in all along the pathways and the parklands, riverbeds, creek sides, woodlands, wild leeks. Now I haven't seen them, but if you're comfortable finding wild leeks, make sure that you're going into an area where there are a lot of them. Japanese knotweed, which you can see on here, grows by the hundreds and is very invasive and is very tasty. So definitely I would start looking for Japanese knotweed because it's really nice when it's fresh in the first 2 months of growth. Maple blossoms are wonderful, exactly what you think they are. They're blossoms from the maple trees, and there's lots and lots of maple trees. So you can find those for a stir fry or batter them. They're delicacy. You can add them to desserts. Coltsfoot, I'll give you a mental note on that one in a minute. Coltsfoot is one of the first plants that comes out. Fiddleheads. There's a lot of do's and don'ts, guidelines that will come into in a short bit, but definitely fiddleheads are very tasty, and they'll be in the supermarkets and they'll be in the local grocery markets too. So maybe look for those in the farmers markets in the next few months, and then ask the farmers how they harvest or where they harvest, and learn some good pro tips that way also. Stinging nettle. Stinging nettle is wonderful. Love that one because it's abundant, spreads very easily, and it's nutritionally dense, very healthy for you. Makes a great tea, makes a great salad. It's great pickled. So definitely I would get to know that one. And garlic mustard, which is on the left here. Garlic mustard is another biennial plant. So it's got a 2-year cycle, which means that the first year you will not see the flowers. It's just a big lump of leaves. And the second year, the garlic mustard shoots up flowers and goes to flower and seed very quickly. So once you get to know this plant, it's very invasive, but it does taste garlicky and has a nice soft garlicky flavor. Great for pestos, salads, stir fries, great for pickled as well. Definitely learn to pick garlic mustard. Comes out very quickly and easily, and you can start harvesting it from as soon as it appears, from I would say April. But the first one that comes up, I'll bring it up again, coltsfoot. Coltsfoot's often mistaken for dandelion because it has a yellow flower. But the difference between dandelion and coltsfoot is that coltsfoot is a March, April, spring plant. Grows along marshy, woodland, moist areas. So you know water's nearby when you see it. And it's the first thing that comes up. It might even come up before snow melts. And there's no leaves. So first the yellow flower comes up and then the leaves. And coltsfoot is another early spring wildflower edible that is good for the respiratory system. So I would recommend you guys pick 2 or 3 from our list here and start getting to know the plants really well, read about them, look at them, join a group, join a club, go on a walkabout, learn online from garden videos and garden clubs, and pick 2 or 3 of the plants and really get to know them so that when you start going out looking for them, they feel familiar, like friends, right? So you can recognize them easily in different locations. So that would be my first how-to in the foraging. Start with 2 or 3. Now let's go over our guideline. There's hundreds of other ways to describe and define how to forage properly, how to forage well, but here's some of my favorite tips that work. Do sample most flowers in the garden. Most flowers are edible, and if you're not sure, look up the lists online, preferably from horticultural societies or garden-related professional groups, so you're getting proper advice. Many flowers have a pleasant taste and are edible, and wonderful to try fresh first and then cooked or baked. Do try only small amounts of new material, especially if you're allergy prone, because you don't know how you personally will react, even if it's edible, right? Do try a nibble of raw, blanched, stir-fried, and baked versions so that you see how the flowers work in different recipes, and then they might change the flavor. Some plants taste much better cooked and also contain more accessible nutrients. This is very true for plants like spinach, which are not wild, but spinach that's raw is very different from spinach that's cooked and what kind of nutrients are available to you. So that's a wonderful thing to learn also. Do check into the same wilderness area in spring, summer, and fall because the plant foods change, as I said. And this brings us to another tip, a pro tip. If you're harvesting something like garlic mustard in the spring, you will get a different flavor and a nutrition profile than you would in the summer because all the plants are going through new growth in the spring. Then they start sending more and more energy into leaves and the flowers in the summer. And a lot of plants then in the fall put all of their energy into the root system. So as they start to die off, then a lot of dense nutrients are found in the roots in the cooler months in the fall. So depending on what you're harvesting and when you're harvesting, you will get a different taste and chemistry, nutrition profile from the plant. So that's why I said pick 2 or 3 plants so you can really investigate in all the different levels and get to know the plant really well about how you want to harvest it, where you want to find it, how you want to cook it, how you want to eat it, how you want to store it. There's a lot of wonderful things to consider. Do you only collect a handful of one plant, not more than 10 to 20% of what you see? And we'll talk a little bit about this in our question period. But I say be messy like the bee, right? So use math if you're not good at being messy, but basically like you pick one here, walk, pick another there, walk. And if you don't see a big area of a particular wildflower or plant, then leave that area alone because it's just being regenerated or growing fresh. Okay. Some plants can only be eaten cooked, like ginkgo biloba nuts, roots and bulbs and tubers also best harvested in the fall and spring. And then lastly, which is very important, do check with local area parks about laws and harvesting rules. So generally, you'll see signs that say garlic mustard is invasive in this area. Then you know you can pick it because the parkland is already trying to get rid of it. And I would stay away from anything else that's locally supposed to be growing there. That's an important thing to know. If you're not sure, ask somebody that is experienced and part of a group or an official setting in the city, in the area that you're in the zone that you're in. So this gives us the summary. Foraging is active finding and gathering or harvesting wild foods. Wild is a relative term. We can find foods just about anywhere in parks, backyards, front yards, farmlands, pastures, woods, and mountainsides. And I like to note the weed underfoot is our greatest healer. So the things that we find in abundance are meant for us. I cannot say this enough. I stress this over and over again. If you see a lot of dandelion, dandelion is meant for you, one way or another, to look at, to enjoy, maybe to eat, to harvest. If we're surrounded by goldenrod, by the thousands, goldenrod is meant for us. It's helped to help alleviate respiratory ailments or give a smile to our face. We are meant to be working with that plant. So when there's a lot of something, it tends to be a message of some kind of a healing or exchange of energy. Okay, some of my favorites. Quick photos here before we wrap up. May to September, mullein, wonderful edible. The long stalk has been used hundreds of years ago as a candlestick, grows thousands and thousands of seeds. Wonderful plant to work with because it has thousands and thousands of babies that it grows into seed. So you can start looking for this one soon, as soon as the snow melts. The leaves are very fuzzy. It's also called nature's toilet paper. So harvesting, not for food necessarily, but when you're camping or hiking, mullein is a wonderful tool to have in your back pocket. Okay, May and June, wild strawberries, they grow by the thousands also. Again, if you were to harvest some fresh young strawberries in the wild, remember there's bunnies, there's deer, there's all kinds of wildlife that are going to be feeding on these. So not more than a handful in a particular area, just to try. Oh, my favorites. Okay, June, linden blossoms. These guys, these gorgeous flowers only bloom for about 7 to 10 days in June, so you got to watch for them. They're a wonderful tea, extremely calming to the respiratory system, and we have hundreds and hundreds of linden trees in the city, and I think most cities, most areas. So if you find a stand of 20, 30, 40 trees, then you can pick a handful of these blossoms and store them, save them, put them into fresh food, make a cordial, and save them for teas for sure. One of my favorites, I write about this one because it is one of my favorites. Dandelions, they grow everywhere. They're so overlooked. They're so unwanted by the general public, I would say, but they have such healing properties. They cleanse our system. They help us detox. They strengthen, fortify, they're tonic, and they're easily accessible everywhere. I love it. I wanted to mention a note about foraging using something like the dandelion. Do not forage in urban hangouts. So this is a picture from our gardens at the food bank. We run a community garden there. And you can see when people hang out, there tends to be garbage and debris. So even though we can pick up things from parkland paths, make sure you're off the beaten path, 10, 15, 20 feet away from a paved area, because people tend to throw garbage and things accumulate. And even though we have a beautiful dandelion here and a strawberry that's become renegade, we also have leftover debris from humans. So definitely don't want to be picking anything in this area or places like that. So that brings us to don'ts. Don't eat anything you're not 100% sure about. So ask around before you get out there. Don't eat from roadsides or around rivers, streams, near industrial and construction runoffs. So check where your location is and ask around about that. What's ahead, what's above, what's at the top of the mountain, what's at the top of the stream or the river. Don't eat challenging new foods without a proper guide, preferably a human and also a book. Example, Himalayan honeysuckle berries, caution advised. Yew berries, yew trees are poisonous, so you have to be careful with what you're looking for. Don't eat mushrooms unless advised by experienced foragers about their species. Mushrooms are very complex. Most of them are very difficult to identify and have duplicates that are poisonous and harmful. So start with plants, easy to find green leafy things before you move on to more difficult subjects. Don't self-treat medical conditions of any kind. Don't assume every year will provide you with bounty. Every year the weather affects what harvest there is, and be mindful of that. So if you see the weather is adverse and the seasons are off, then maybe it's a good year to not forage, especially leave alone things that are not as abundant as you're normally seeing them. Avoid chemical fixers in urban areas. So some plants really do take up a lot of toxins and hold on to them. Those are the ones you want to avoid in urban areas or urban foraging for sure. There's another reference here, and this can be made available as a download handout later also, but there's hundreds of these kind of charts. So I just added this in for reference that almost everything that we consider a weed is helpful, useful, tasty, can be used as a tea or even a food. And I say these are pioneers because these are some of the plants that come into places, into zones first where the area is disturbed, and they make way for more complex plants. So these pioneers set the stage and allow other plants to move in later on. And I wanted to bring to your attention, this is very interesting so that you learn to really get to know your plants. Love the dandelion. We had this happen in our garden last year. Fasciation is fascinating. Sometimes just genetical reproduction. Plants will do this. They'll grow a bunch of stems or fuse things together as they're growing. And it's a good moment, good time to pause and say, what is this? Is it chemical toxicity? Is it pesticide use? What's happening here? So when you're harvesting or looking around what's underfoot, take a really good look around the area to see how healthy all the plants are. And in a case like this, this is just a genetic variant, but it helps you become more aware and mindful. So, okay, I want to make sure that this zone is clean and healthy. We don't use pesticides or any kind of chemicals in our area at the food bank, but you know, it makes you pause and say, okay, is there something leaking into our zone? So keep it in mind when you're looking around. Don't just harvest one little spot. Have a good look around the whole area. Where are you? Take note of the setting. Does it look healthy? Does it smell healthy? Is there anything new construction-wise in the region that you're foraging? Keep all that in mind. I just thought this is fascinating as a lesson to remind you that. Okay, and then this is to go with the toxicity, how wonderful and strong, wonderful plants are, how much they work in the environment, that when you're harvesting, if you were harvesting a bit too close to an industrial zone or construction zone or in an urban area that's not so clean, some of this might be happening in the plants that you're harvesting. This is an example in February 1996, Phytotech, Princeton, New Jersey-based company, reported that it had developed transgenic strains of sunflowers that could remove as much as 95% of the toxic contaminants in as little as 24 hours. So what this is telling you is that they created a plant that is absorbing so much of the toxicity from the earth, from the atmosphere, from the environment. So you do not want to be picking plants that are capable of this in an area that's been disturbed. So you want to be careful. And by being careful, I mean you want to research, get to know 2 or 3 plants, everything about them, ask around who's foraged them before, tell people where you're going, find out more about the region where you're going, and then bring maybe a human along with you on the phone, at least for now, and a good book for reference to make sure you're foraging safely and wisely. And then remember, just for fun, some things that might happen when you're foraging for dandelions, your hands will get stained. So you might want to have a shovel or clean shears and gloves, unless you want to have yellow fingers. And then towards the end, I think this is at the end of our slides, name that flower. I'm going to leave this, see if you guys can remember this, write it down if you know what this is. The blue, name that flower in the middle, that's a small golden, and name the flower on the right. All wonderful edibles, things that grow in the parkland and in the garden. And I think that wraps it up. I stay happy foraging. This is the end of me talking. Lots to cover. We could talk about this for hours, but hopefully that has sent you guys some inspiration and some excitement to get you going out there soon as it melts. So I know there was a lot, but there's just so much to share. So hopefully we have a couple of minutes for questions.
That was perfect, actually. That was a lot of information. I'm put your questions in the chat box, either on YouTube or Zoom, and I can relay them to Monika. So we do have one. Is there a good field book you would recommend for a beginner?
Definitely, and not any specific printing, but look for, let's say, Eastern Board Wildflowers. There's a couple of books that are published for Ontario Wildflowers or Ontario Wildlife and Foraging. So you could find a book like that, but I would not necessarily limit to, if you could get both, I would get Ontario, but then I would just get the whole Eastern region, because there's a lot of flowers that migrate back and forth to look at the zones, because there's not much difference between us and, let's say, New York or Michigan or that area. So you want to get an idea of what's supposed to grow in that whole area. Right. And if you're going out west, you want to get one for the West Coast. And if you're going to be in the mountainous regions, have a book for the mountain regions that like focus on that. Okay.
And somebody would like to know if there's a good recipe book with wild plants.
Recipe book. I have a few. I don't think I have them here. There's a couple of farm books, which we can post. Maybe I can send you the link to you guys, or names to them. I have a couple of farm books from farm, not publishers, but from farm growers, and they put together wild harvesting recipes. And then some of the best recipes I found in foraging and culinary schools. So there's culinary schools now that talk about using wonderful things in the wild in their recipes. So I would look for those websites.
Yeah, that's awesome, because you need to know what to do with them once you've harvested all this stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because as you mentioned, some things do need to be cooked before you eat them. Don't assume everything can be eaten raw. So that's
absolutely. And so that's the thing. So you want to, the other thing that we didn't really touch on it, but we were getting there before, Helen, is that when you pick up a plant, I recommend you look at least 5 different sources, but that's just me. So you look at 5 completely different sources. I usually look up a government research paper. I'll look up a horticulture note. I'll look up a popular website and a couple other places to see what all the different sources are saying about the plant, because you don't know where people are getting their information from. Mm-hmm. So one resource could be fairly dry but accurate, and another resource will be colorful and fun, but not that accurate. So then put all that information about dandelion or burdock together, and you have a very good profile as to how you'd want to use the plant.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I would add to that get to know what it grows with, that you can usually find it with, because some of those other plants might be endangered and you don't want to be stepping on them while you're trying to get the plant you are foraging for. So that's part of the whole ethical issue that we were talking about before the call began, that it's just really educate yourself. I think Monika would agree. Educate yourself on what you're harvesting, yeah. But it also includes surrounding flowers and the area you're harvesting in.
Yeah, and so that's a very good point. It's a good way to finish, is that in our region, we're all along the Humber River. There's a new project that's ongoing, I think, with York University and maybe one of the other surrounding universities. So there's signs up that say rehabilitation area. So if there's something new that comes up, you are bound to respect that, right? So just because you had gone there a year before or 2 years before, if you see notices it's saying something being studied, or there's a regeneration project going on, that is, it's your responsibility to honor that and go elsewhere. Right.
So leave things, and then we'll wrap up. Are there any guided walks in Halton? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know. Are there? Like, I know that, like, this is too far from you guys, but like Rattlesnake Point, places like that, they'll have groups. like meetup groups that organize walks, but I don't know if the Halton region does. We'll have to look it up.
Halton area. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you would have to do a little bit of a Google search. Or do you have anything on your Facebook that has affiliated sites?
We have mostly resources for gardening and picking up materials and supplies. That's actually a good blog to put up. So maybe what we can do is we'll put a listing of some of our favorite walks that are available, and then we can put into a blog post on the Legs Etobicoke site.
That would be a wonderful resource. And so I think everybody is wondering, what are those flowers that you posted on your last slide there?
Right. So the first one is Forage, which makes a wonderful oil, herbal oil, but it's also great and fresh in salads, and it tastes like cucumber. Second one, Calendula, grows by the hundreds, wonderful to add in any garden for everything. And then the third one was a Helianthus, a type of sunflower, which there's hundreds of species also. So all of those are a wonderful addition into a salad, but also into a garden and into wherever you may be, wherever you might find yourself.
Good, yeah. I think Loretta got that right. Loretta, you should have joined our trivia night last night. You would have done well.
Oh, you guys had a trivia night?
Yeah, all plant related. It was good.
Oh my gosh, fantastic. Okay.
But thank you.
So
I was just going to say thank you very much for joining us. If you have any last remarks for us, because this is such an interesting field that people, I guess, are getting back into, because it's what humans originally did, and now we have stepped away from that. So it's good to learn all about it again.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I think my parting words are, if you're going to start foraging, remember that you have to be one with the wildlife, right? So you have to be one with the squirrels and the raccoons and the bunnies and everything that's there. Even if you don't see them, a lot of the creatures are underfoot now. So walk carefully, take your time, and do it over and over again in different regions, right? Take your time. That's what I would say. Take your time. Enjoy.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for joining us. This has been a real pleasure to speak with you.
Okay, I'll see you guys later. Have a great week.
Bye. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.